Hi, welcome to UMBC's In the Loop. I'm Michelle Stefano, the folklorist in residence here in the American Studies Department, and I'm joined by Stephen Bradley, Associate Professor in the Visual Arts Department, and Dr. Nicole King, Assistant Professor in American Studies. So, we're going to be talking about the Mapping Baybrook project that Professors Bradley and King have been engaging with and leading for numerous years now. So my first question is, could you just describe what the Mapping Baybrook project is?
Sure, Michelle. Mapping Baybrook is a digital mapping project which attempts to locate and place the stories, the culture, the history, and the artistic fiber of a community in South Baltimore, referred to as Baybrook. And it kind of developed out of coursework as well as my research and Steve's practice as an artist.
So how did it start? What year are we talking about?
Well, it came out of this class that I teach, Preserving Places, Making Spaces in Baltimore, that I taught for the first time in 2009, and we started working in Brooklyn. And I realized this history of Brooklyn and Curtis Bay was an untold story. And the ways and the complexity of these different neighborhoods in the area that really needed to be visually and auditorily, kind of commemorated. So I had seen some of Steve's work. We met at a digital storytelling workshop. And then I saw a brown bag he did on some amazing radio programming in North Avenue in Baltimore. And so I approached Steve and told him about the community. And when he came out, it resonated with another community that he had been working internationally. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, that was in High Plot, Netherlands, which is southeast of Rotterdam Harbor. And also the Rotterdam Harbor resonated nicely with the harbor of Baltimore.
Okay. So maybe just give an overview of the history of the Baybrook areas and what Baybrook means.
All right, great. So the greater Baybrook area, which is a term, Baybrook is a term for the two neighborhoods that remain the residential communities of Brooklyn and Curtis Bay. So the community itself, they have Fair and Baybrook Park, Baybrook Elementary and Middle School, Community Development Corporation, the Baybrook Coalition. So it's kind of the colloquialism when you put these two communities together. And this area was an industrial area starting in the mid, but really beginning to boom in the late 19th century. And it had a host of 6 different communities, which are now no longer exist. It had Fairfield, Wagner's Point, Hawkins Point, and Masonville. And all of those communities are now gone and have been torn down. So part of the project is to kind of commemorate the history of these lost neighborhoods and put it in the context of Brooklyn and Curtis Bay of today. And that's why mapping is so important, because to see place and the importance of place and how we understand and connect these different places and how they move as well.
Mm-hmm. So you bring up this idea of mapping. Is there a place where you are mapping these stories and memories?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we should maybe talk about the interface of what Mapping Baybrook looks like. Essentially, it looks like everyone's used Google Maps. So it's a Google Map interface. We worked with, in 2011, the Imaging Research Center, the IRC, here at UMBC. We had a summer faculty fellowship, and we worked with them to develop this kind of digital mapping. So if you go to mappingbaybrook.org, you essentially see a huge map. We wanted the map to be aesthetically and intellectually central to what's going on. And so there's a bunch of points on the map. And if you click on one of those points, it brings up stories, some of Steve's audio work, as well as photographs that have been taken.
Right. It also is a WordPress site, actually, with a plugin that allows the Google Map to be front end of that. So when you open it up and start inputting content, it's really a WordPress. But it's a kind of a hybrid between WordPress and Google Map. Kind of new territory, actually, for this kind of mapping work.
Mm-hmm. And so you brought up Steve's audio work. Would you talk a little more about that?
Yeah, I have always been fascinated by the sounds of the voices of different people. In fact, when I was in the Netherlands, because I didn't speak Dutch, often I'd be hearing the Dutch language, and I would walk around with my microphone and get as close as I could to different individuals, not knowing really what they were talking about, and would capture their voices. But I learned a really interesting technique where even though I didn't speak the language, many of the Dutch do speak English, but the older generation didn't speak as much English. So I'd have a Dutch speaking and an English speaking Dutchman or Dutch woman share stories about the harbor. And so that was the beginnings of what really has led to Brooklyn Curtis Bay. Of course, everybody in Brooklyn speaks English, as far as I know, pretty much.
And what are you recording around the Baybrook area?
Besides the voices, I'm recording ambient sounds, so the industrial, the natural, sometimes I haven't done a lot of that in Brooklyn, Curtis Bay, but even underwater sounds. To me, the sounds of place really is a signature of that place, not just what we see or the voices that we hear from individuals from those places.
Mm-hmm. So your project is really the centerpiece of the larger Breaking Ground initiative here at UMBC, which seeks to bring, quite literally, students off campus to engage with real people, real issues in the greater Baltimore area. So could you talk about how Breaking Ground has helped this project, and then also maybe a little bit about how students have been involved?
It'd be good to define Breaking Ground too. Breaking Ground is a small amount of funds to help faculty look at the way they're teaching, perhaps also collaborating with other disciplines. Also, civic agency can also happen within the classroom. It doesn't have to necessarily happen off campus. But what I like about Breaking Ground, or the funding, is helping us find ways to get the students off campus into what I call the neighborhood, which is the laboratory where we're learning. So, and that's supported by the provost.
Right. So how have students been involved with MIP in Baybrook?
Well, we could talk about this current semester, because this has been an ongoing project, and we're kind of focusing on issues of environmental justice, because this area, with its history of kind of boom around World War II, and then industry began to leave the area and go elsewhere, so that the community experienced a decline. And it's also a food desert, which means that if fresh produce is not available in the community. So we have kind of partnered with, and traditionally we partner with nonprofits who have small staffs, who often struggle, and we're working with the Filbert Street Community Garden, which is at this lovely peak on the top of a hill that you can kind of see the community. One of our central photographs that Steve has taken is from that vista down to the coal piers and towards the water. And the Filbert Street Community Garden is not only a garden that community members can have garden plots and grow fresh vegetables, it's also an education center and kind of a hub for bringing the community together. So, just a few weekends ago, we had our students out there planting fruit trees, working on a memorial garden for some community members who had died in a fire, and the community gardeners were there. So students are not only working in the garden, but they're also working to document the garden, to do an Indiegogo campaign to help fundraise with the garden. We have a big fundraiser at the end of the semester, the Garden Gala, which is on May 18th at 2640 space, where really the students are doing this together. We just a few, like an hour ago, we were meeting talking about how
all of us together,
the art was going to feature in the silent auction, how we could help one another in planning the events. My students are based in kind of doing place-based cultural documentation, and they've been looking at green spaces, not only the garden, but looking at all those other green spaces that we don't think and we don't associate with industrial space a lot of times, because there's a huge park in this area. There's a remediated cove that is an urban nature center. So even though it is an industrial or deindustrializing community, it's full of green space, and we're really trying to uncover the hidden aspects in the greater Baybrook area.
One of the interesting projects, so I think it's interesting, that my students are working on is they became disturbed by the amount of trash in all of our neighborhoods, not just in Brooklyn Curtis Bay, so they started collecting the trash. We looked at a number of artists that have, like Merrill Latterman Eucalyptus, Mark Dion, who look at detritus from society, basically. And so we are taking the trash and looking at what we consider the most interesting trash and re-boxing it or repackaging it and putting a label on it, or calling it sort of artifacts of consumerism, and selling it back to the public. And we've had a couple test cases. One was at the Breezeway a couple weeks ago, and people were wanting to know how to buy these. And again, selling the trash is a way to help the garden. All the money, the proceeds will go back to hiring a full-time manager of the garden, hopefully somebody within the community. I also think it's very interesting seeing our students who come from two different disciplines, actually more disciplines than just two, but many different disciplines, learning how to cooperate, learning how to find ways of taking this methodology and this methodology that they've been working on and combining them hybridizing them and really coming up with new teaching opportunities or ways of thinking about the world. And we are learning as much about this whole process as the students are.
I know you've been doing some work at Benjamin Franklin Elementary School.
It's actually a high school.
High school,
yeah,
excuse me.
Ben Franklin High
Could you
School.
talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, when Nicole and I agreed to start working together, I thought one of the smartest things to do is to figure out how do you interface with a community who, first off, is suspicious of outsiders, which I can't blame them. They have a long history of promises that have been made that have never been kept. So the first thing that I did was through one of actually Nicole's students, Missy, what's Missy's last name?
Bishop.
Missy Bishop had been working in the community and in the
She worked for the Baybrook Coalition?
the Baybrook Coalition. So she opened the door for me to start working at Ben Franklin High School. It's a turnaround school. They've had there's a brand new high school, 3 years old when I came into it. And there was an opportunity to start meeting in the high school, and they were 4+1, so they go to school from Monday to Thursday. And then Friday was an open session. So we had 3.5 hours we were meeting at the high school, making art, making animations, augmenting a lot of the coursework that the art teacher was able to offer. So unfortunately that has ended, and we're looking at other projects that interface with the community.
But you still do the after-school program?
Yes, and when I'm on sabbatical in the fall, when I come back, I'll reinitiate or re-engage the high school through an after-school project that is actually looking at working at the Art Pratt Free Library, possibly the Curtis Bay Rec Center, looking at several agencies to negotiate to then interface with the high school.
So over these years, these semesters of again, taking students off campus and going out and doing research in the Baybrook area, how do you find, how would you describe the community reception to this over time? Has trust been built, or have there been challenges?
Yeah, well, I think one thing that we've learned and we talk about often in working with communities and working with students, some of the methods are similar, that you need to give agency, that this is their community. You come in and say, how can I help? What are some projects that are going on? What is it that you need? And it's a similar thing that we kind of do with our students. What do you want this project to be? What can you contribute to this project? And so we kind of allow the community to, like with the garden, Jason came to us and said, we need to do some stuff in the garden to get this fundraiser. We would really love to work with you guys. Okay, great. And then you bring it to the students. How are we going to do this? Where are we going to do this? What, for my class, they have to also, it's a class in social entrepreneurship. So we, work with fundraising. And attempt to take the grant that we have and to make it work for the community. So to take, say, $1,500 and think about how can you turn that into more money for the community. So it really is, sometimes it becomes difficult because we have to pull back a little bit, let the students go. And in the same way, we have to always respect the voices of the community members.
Absolutely.
And
Right.
I think we've gained a lot of trust over time with some community members, and we've been working since 2010, so this is like 4 years into the project. It hasn't been quick or easy, but I think we've been around long enough, and we've done some projects that are pretty successful that we almost feel like we're I don't live in the community, but it's kind of like my second home. We spend a lot of time there. We feel connected to the place, which is so much of what Mapping Baybrook is about seeing place, understanding place, and this idea of bringing people together, in this kind of community space. So we're really supportive of that, and I think we have been supported in the community, and we hope that
I would definitely say
continue.
that. Yeah. The challenge, though, is when things don't work out, the community changes a little bit, or there's shifts, and I think those are really great lessons for the students, even though they might see that as failure. I think those are great, important lessons for them to experience. And I think we're always behind the scenes, even between the semester, working within the community and continuing the project. I have volunteers from the Linehan Artist Scholars who volunteer with me, even past the semester, so they're coming out to work in the community, not even in the context of a course. So it's pretty impressive to see a student stepping out of the tradition of academia.
Right, there's a lot of
To
buy-in.
solve it, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So some outputs, so to speak, of this project are obviously the website, which I should say is mappingbaybrook.org. And it's interactive. You're not just a visitor of it. There's lots to see and click on and listen to and watch. But also this exhibition in May 2013 at Maryland Art Place. I know you were a big leader in that product, so to speak,
Right.
of the project. Could you speak more about
Yeah, Jeremy Stern had been selected as an incubator curator through the Maryland Art Place, and he approached a number of artists who were involved in place-based research, and then a colleague had introduced our research to the curator, and he approached me. His name's Jeremy Stern. I think currently he's an artist in residence at Creative Alliance. And so Jeremy approached me and asked me if I'd be interested in showing the work. I talked to Nicole, and it was some interesting moments. I've never been in a show. And I said, well, this is your first time. This will be good for you.
Yeah, I learned, I'm
Yeah.
familiar with history exhibitions, which
Right.
have a lot of text and are very kind of straightforward. You're trying to give these certain stories. And Steve brought me into this whole new world of an art exhibition, and how, you have to be much more kind of focused and kind of, how you set it up was really you, and then we would kind of collaborate a little bit.
Right. And I also was very sensitive to that. This had elements of cultural history, and so I often was going to Nicole and I'd ask, is this okay? Does this make sense to you? Well, one of the more interesting projects or aspects of that project is when I asked Nicole to write a text for these photographs that we had selected. And the first time she gave me the text, it was a long manuscript. And I said, Nicole,
It
that's
has
too long.
footnotes.
I said, can you write some haiku or some poetry? And she like scratched her head and said, yeah, I'm going to try that.
And it was great.
It was fantastic.
And I just want to point out that these photographs emerged from ethnographic oral history interviews
yes.
with,
Right.
so that's another big component of Mapping Baybrook.
That certainly is, and that's
Yeah.
one of the things that is a true collaboration, because my training in kind of, cultural documentation and oral history is to come in to get, the facts, to get the stories. Steve records the oral histories, but he also is a part of the conversation and a part of the whole project of talking with people, recording. One of the great things about the MAP exhibition that I think when working with Steve as an audio artist was so innovative and so interesting is that he had these speakers above where you could hear the voices and the sounds, the ambient sounds of the community. So kind of when you walked through the exhibition, you kind of felt a sense of place, because you not only were looking at things, you were hearing things, you were kind of experiencing place.
And because sound is difficult to control, I had to build my own parabolic speakers from IKEA salad bowls, and actually very functional. And I floated the salad bowls above the space. The parabolics were above the space, so you were immersed in the sound of place as you experienced the various kiosks and smaller installations.
Yeah, and the photos, as you were saying, they do come out of this kind of oral history, ethnographic engagement with the community. We talk to people wherever they feel most comfortable, which is often their homes, and we feel very honored when they invite us into their homes and talk with us and allow us to record them, and often bring out, suitcases
Artifacts.
of photos,
Oh, man.
or have photos on their wall that become really important in the conversations, because it is so. That's why we, kind of develop this, because really to understand a place, it's visual. It's it's oral, it's visceral,
Tactile, right.
and meeting people where they are in their homes, wherever they feel comfortable, has been, we've had a lot of fun times.
I know in the early days when Nicole would give me these little tours around Brooklyn, Curtis Bay, Fairfield, and Wagner's Point, I would be like, who lives in that house? What does the inside of the house look like? And it's been a real pleasure and gift to be able to go into these individuals' homes and not just hear their voices, but see how they live and see the artifacts that are important to them, and to appreciate that with them. And often the artifacts, the photographs that we re-photograph are sometimes the only documents we have about these individuals in this place. Unfortunately, historical societies typically haven't really focused in this area. So I think we are serving a really important role in documenting and collecting and archiving these, to me, a very unique location.
Right, and when we teach these courses, our students do those things.
Exactly.
They go and they're invited in. It's lovely because I get to sit back and kind of watch them work. The most recent oral history interview we did was with Mary Rossa, who is a environmental activist for over 50 years, working in the Brooklyn Curtis Bay area. And Johnny, one of Steve's students, came to record. 2 of my students did the interview, and I essentially just sat in the back and petted Mary's dog and, watched them while they worked. So it's really, we're trying to bring students into the actual research, into the actual process, and essentially make them do most of the work.
Well, the core, I would think, element of a lot of these Breaking Ground projects is talking to people.
Exactly.
And while that is, it's such an honor to be invited into homes and to have these experiences, it's also daunting, particularly for students, first-time interviewers. How do you prepare students for those situations?
I think one of the more central parts of that is listening, learning how to turn off the voice and turn off the expectations that you have to say something immediately. Sometimes the awkward moments of silence are really important to allow to happen, and I think that is a huge part of listening to hear these nuance and these unique sort of voices. I don't know, you might be able to answer.
Yeah, well, and I think it's one way that Breaking Ground really helps because we're able to bring in experts. I bring in, every semester I teach Linda Shopes, who's been doing oral history work in the Baltimore area for many, many, many decades. She's very experienced. She knows what she's doing. She is great with the students, and she gives them the tools. And it's really interesting to bring in Linda because Linda and I don't always agree on everything. Right. So the students get to see 2 professionals who are in the same area, kind of, negotiating and talking about the different aspects of what their practice is. So, and students sometimes, oh, wow, there's more than one way to do this. You can have a different perspective on it. And I think getting the students to get out there and to ask questions, to learn to listen, once they do their first oral history interview, then it's, kind of much easier the next time.
And actually, they're anxious to start again and do the next one.
So let's switch to the future.
Okay.
Breaking Ground promotes semester-long projects. And in a way, that could be a limitation because it also promotes projects that are sustainable or that have long-lasting effects in the community.
Right.
So what's the future? What do you see for Mapping Baybrook?
I think that's the big question is how do you sustain particularly the relationship with the community. I'm going to continue going, but it's every semester we start brand new. Some semesters I may have 2 or 3 students. It's not a class, it's these volunteers that come out of different aspects of the university. But that's a good question. I'm not sure I have an answer for maybe.
Well, and I think why we might grapple with this very good question a little bit is because when we're doing this, it's so organic, and we again honoring what the community's doing, and the community has changed, and community associations, some things have disappeared, other things have arisen. That we're really working with the community's ebbs and flows. So our projects kind of work with what the community's doing. But I know that Steve and I want to continue to teach this course and to teach it and bring together students from different disciplines. But we don't see it as a course, we see it as kind of a project. And we are, we want to collaborate with other people like your work in Sparrows Point and other industrial and deindustrializing areas in the Baltimore region and beyond to really get these stories out and to, as you often say, to amplify the voices of the people that we study, and to work with students and have them innovate and come up with great ideas. I mean, I've taught this course 2009, 11, 12. So this is the 4th time that I've taught this course. And I still have students, Missy Bishop, who ended up working in the community. She was in the 2009 course. She's come back. She was here this semester, came and talked to the students. She's still doing nonprofit work and fundraising work. I have a whole group of students who have been a part of this project who still come to the events we always have at the end of the semester. I keep in touch with them. I write them really good letters of recommendation because I get to know them very well. So it's almost like an ongoing project and almost like there's a community of people doing the work, my students, Steve's students, which is one of the best things and I think is a real innovation. And what we're doing now, speaking of the future, that's really interesting, bringing not together just our classes, but your class on ethnography in America and Bill Shoebridge's class on the MCS Fellows, and both of our classes together on a radio series for the Mark Steiner Show. And what they're doing is taking the oral history, taking all of the research, going through it, and putting it together into this 5-day radio series that merges the voices of Brooklyn and Curtis Bay residents with the residents of the Sparrows Point communities, as you know, and It's a lot of work because
Very daunting.
sometimes I'm like, just let me do it. Just I'll do it. But you don't. You pull back. You let the students do the work, and they're doing a really great job. And we'll see how that turns out, and you can check it out.
Great. Well, if you'd like to add anything else, I think that was really informative, and I thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Michelle.
Michelle.
And
Those are great
thank you.
questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.